In this video, we will continue to look at the introduction of the object. We had the class defined from the previous video, and we instantiated a couple of objects called time1 and time2, and we had some constructors to deal with those. And we also had one function that was used to write out the time of day. Let's pick up from there. The first thing I want to do is to add a couple of, actually 3 more functions to the class. And these functions are going to be, well, let's just put them right in here. These functions are going to, one is to increment the clock, and it's going to be time of day. That's going to be the type, and the function is going to call it increment. Okay, and let's see, increment, and it will not have any arguments, so we'll just have empty parentheses there. The next function I want to add is going to be one that we'll use to compare times. So it will return true or false, so that will be a type Boolean, and we'll name it equal. And it will have an argument of type time of day called other time. Okay, and we'll add our semicolon after that. And the third and last function will also return true or false, so it's a type Boolean, and it compares less than. It's also going to have an argument, time of day is the type, and it's going to be also other time. So now we have added 3 more member functions to the class. We have to write the code for these as we would any other kind of function. So before we start to use these, we have to write the code. So let's scroll down to the bottom of the program and let's type in the code that goes with these functions. Okay, this one is time of day increment. So let's start with that one. So the function is going to be type time of day, and it will be bound, of course, to the class time of day. And the name of the function is increment, and it has no arguments. The purpose of this function is to just add 1 second to the current time. So whatever the time happens to be, this function, when we call it, it'll add 1 second. Inside this function, we are going to have another object instantiated. Okay, so it's time of day. Time of day is, I'm sorry, time of day is the type, and result is the name of the function. And it has arguments hours, minutes, and seconds. Okay, so let's look at this. Remember that we can use the class to declare the type of a variable, and in the terminology we're using now, we're actually making a result is going to be an object. So the object is of the same type as time of day, and when we are declaring it, we are giving it 3 parameters: hours, minutes, and seconds. So within this function, we're going to use a constructor when we declare time of day. And the constructor that we will be using is going to be this one up here because it has 3 formal arguments. So now we are going to use this variable or object result inside the function time of day. This is a function that will return a value. So let's go down to the end of the function and let's do our return. And result is the thing that is going to be returned. Notice that result is declared up here as an object of type time of day, and this function is also of type time of day. So the same rules for functions do still apply here. Okay, so to begin with, we need to increment the seconds. So let's take the seconds field of result and let's write it like this: result dot seconds plus plus. So what we're doing is we are accessing one of the private variables of the type or object class time of day. So we're going to take whatever the current seconds happens to be, and we will increment that, and we will assign it over here to result.seconds. Now we have to take into account the possibility that we are at the boundary of a minute and then of an hour, and if we are at 59 seconds, we have to update the minutes. So we have to type in several if statements now. So if results.seconds is greater than 59, then that means we need to increment the minutes. So we will set result.seconds equal to 0, and we will set result.minutes equal to result.minutes plus plus. And let's put a semicolon right there. So if we are at the boundary of a minute, then we will update our seconds to 0, and we'll set the minutes to minutes plus 1. Well, what if the minutes happen to be 59? Well, now we need to update the hour. First, I need to fix my typo right there. So we have another if statement. So if result dot minutes is greater than 59, then we will need to set the minutes to 0 and update the hours. So result.minutes is 0. And let's add 1 to hours. Result.hours equals result.hours plus plus. Now, if the hours is approaching 23 or 24, then we need to update that as well. So we're using the 24-hour clock here. So we had another if statement. So if hours is greater than 23, then we need to update the hours clock because we have moved into a new day. So we have result.hours is going to be reset to 0 because we did just cross over from midnight, and then that will take care of it. So this function is going to update the seconds and the minutes and the hours, and those are the private variables that go with the class time of day. The other function that we will need is a test equal function, so let's go ahead and do that one next. The test equal function will compare 2 times. So 2 objects will be passed into the function, and then it will just compare the times. If they're equal, it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. This will be a Boolean type. Okay, Boolean, the type is, the binding is time of day. We always have to bind it to the class. And the function is called equal. And it has a formal parameter of type time of day. That's called other time. Then we have the body of the function. Then we need to write code to make this work. Well, okay, this one is going to return true or false. So let's have a local variable that's a type Boolean called value. And we can set it to whatever we like here. True or false, turns out it doesn't matter. Then the way we compute it is like this. Okay, value is going to be equal to some long conditional statement. So it's hours first. We'll compare the hours. If the hours is equal to the other time hours, and then of course we need to make sure the minutes are the same. Minutes is equal to the other time dot minutes. Then if those two are the same, the next thing we have to make sure about is the seconds. So seconds equal to other time dot seconds. If all of those are equal, then the result is true for value, and we return value. If any of these are not true, then the whole thing is false, and we return false. So this little Boolean function will determine whether the two times that it works on are equal or not. So this function will compare two times, and one will be, if one's less than the other and the order will make a difference, then it will return true. All right, so we are going to need a Boolean type. Time of day binds it, and less than is the name of the function. It has one formal parameter, time of day, other time, like the previous function. Now let's add the code to make the time of day, actually the less than function work. So we need Boolean value again. And we can set that to false. Really, it doesn't matter what we set it to here because it will be changed by this next statement. Value is going to be equal to the hours less than other time hours. So that's the first part of this. We're comparing two things. Now, one of these you'll note is hours that doesn't have other time associated with it, and the other thing we're comparing is other time dot hours. These are hours from two different objects that we're comparing, and we'll see how that works when we call the functions shortly. But regardless, if hours is less than other time hours, then this thing is true. But the hours could be equal, so we need to test to see when the hours are equal but the minutes are different. So we need an OR function here. And let's drop back and type this on the same line. This is going to get pretty long. So the OR possibility would be that the hours would be equal to the other time hours, but the minutes could be different. Okay, left out the R. So we need to AND the minutes is less than other time dot minutes. If that's true, then the hours will be the same, but the minutes will be different. So if this one is less than the other time minutes, then this will also be true. The third possibility then would be if both the minutes and the hours are the same, but the seconds are different. So let me just copy this and do a bit of editing so I don't have to type so much. So we still have the same thing here. If the hours are equal and the minutes, let's change that to equal, and then we'll come back and do the seconds down here. The seconds would be less than other time dot seconds. Then in this case, if the seconds would be less than other time seconds, then that means that also the object that has that as its private variable would be less than this object, and the whole thing would be less than. At any rate, that long expression returns true if the hours of one, minutes, and so on of one is less than the other. Otherwise, it returns false. So if they're equal, or if the object that comes in with the dot notation is less than the one that comes in here, it will be false. Either way, we will return value. semicolon there, semicolon there. Now, this completes the coding of the functions. Let's scroll up and call these other functions to see what's going on. Let's scroll up here. It says compare the times time 1 and time 2 for equality. In order to do that, let's see how we can use this equal function. So if time 1 dot equal and we pass in time 2 here, then we see out the times are equal with an end line. But let's make that be a C out. It looks like it's supposed to be a C in. Now, let's go ahead and do this. If they're not equal, let's print out something there too. So let's just print out else C out the times are different with the end line here. And let's also put a system pause here. In fact, let's just move this system pause down so that we don't get into the other functions just yet. Okay, now then, look at how we are calling the equal function. Equal is one of the member functions of the class time of day. We can use either object time 1 or time 2 in order to call equal. We can do either one of those. In this case, we're going to use time 1 with the dot notation, and then we have the name of the function. So we're calling the function, but we're sending it as an argument time 2. Okay, so time 1 is going into the function because it is one of the members of the class time 1. But we're passing time 2 in as an argument the way we would normally do with the function. And I know this is something totally different. Let's now go down to the function and let's look at what's happening down here. When we get to equal, we have hours, we have minutes, and we have seconds. These belong to time 1. Okay, these private variables belong to the object time 1 that we're using to call the function. Other time is time 2. Other time is a parameter, and we're sending in time 2 as a parameter. So these variables over here, without the dot, hours, minutes, and notation, hours, minutes, and seconds, those belong to the object that is being used to call the function, in this case time 1. And these others, these hours, minutes, and seconds, those belong to the function argument other time. So when we call the function equal, time 1, we don't explicitly pass hours, minutes, and seconds because they go in as part of the object that's being used to call the function. Time 2 passed like a normal parameter, so we do have to access its members using the dot notation. All right, now let's just go ahead and compile and run the program. Here you see the result. The time 1 equals 5:30. That came from the cout time 1, the time 1.write function up there, and the time 2.write functions. The times are different. Well, that came from the if statement here when we called time 1 equal to time 2. It returns false, so the times are different. Okay, so we know that they're different because we just showed them here. 5:30 and 0 are different times. So the result is the times are different. Now, let's move down. The next statement says make the times equal and do the operations again. Okay, so I'm just going to move my system pause down as we work our way through the rest of this program. So if we want to make the times equal, then it turns out there's a very easy way for us to do this. Note, if I say time 1 equals time 2, then I don't get any errors. So with an object, and in fact with a struct, if you wanted to copy the entire contents of one object to another, then we can do this with a simple assignment statement. So this will set the times to be the same, and this thing is called an aggregate. It's an aggregate copy. It copied everything with just one assignment statement here. Okay, now that we have made them equal, then let's just copy and let's paste our if statement from up here to compare the times. And this time, since they're equal, then the output should be the times are equal. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile and run the program. Okay, here we have the results. So this time you can see that we get the times are equal. So in the first set of the if statement up here, the times were different, so we got the output, the times are different. We made the times equal here, and we called the function again, and this time it came back that they are the same. So we did see the times are equal here in the output. Now let's increment the time and compare them again. This illustrates how we'll use the increment function also. Okay, let's go look at the increment function again. And where is it? Here we go. That's the increment function. So with this one, it is a call by value. It returns a value called result, so we will need to make sure we collect that information in the main program. So the way that we need to call this function would be, let's use time 2. Time 2 is going to equal to time2.increment, semicolon, except the increment function does want empty parentheses. Now let's write out the two times and let's compare them. So we have code already to do that. So let's just copy that block of code and let's paste it here after we increment. Then we can write out time 1, we can write out time 2, then we'll compare them, and then we will stop. So let's put the system pause back right there. And let's build the program, run the program. Now as we work our way down through the program, here's the output that we have. So the second time through, when we set the times to be equal, we were up here. And now when I increment time 2, we'll see both of them were 0. So when I increment time 2, it comes back as 1 second. So this line here, we incremented time 2, it went from 0 to 1 second. Then we output time 1 and time 2. That's what you see here. Then we moved on to compare the times with the if statement, and since 0 is less than or different than 1, then we get the result back that the times are different. Now let's move on and do one more change. Now let's move the system pause down again. And this one says we want to instantiate a time near the end of the day. Alrighty, well, instantiate, that's the fancy word we're using now with object-oriented terminology. That really means we're going to declare a variable. So we'll instantiate an object. Well, the name of the class is time of day. And let's just call it time 3. And we'll instantiate it near the end of the day. We want to try out our increment function and see if it crosses over midnight. Okay, so time of day, time 3, so let's do 23 hours and 59 minutes and 30 seconds, or let's make it 50 seconds. Okay, now note, remember that when we do this, then we call our constructor and it sets the time of the private variables hours, minutes, and seconds to 23:59:50. So that's what this line does. Now, and let's just eliminate that system pause because we're at the end anyway. So let's back that up. Let's print out time 3. So again, I can borrow some code here, copy that, and just so that we'll have it written back to the screen, we will print out time 3 and time 3.write. Now this one says that what we would like to do here is let's go into a loop and let's increment the time and print it out until it crosses over midnight. So we need to add 10 seconds. Then we will see if our increment is working correctly. Alrighty, so that's easy enough. We just need a little for loop here for int k is equal to 0, k is less than or equal to 10, and k plus plus. Inside our loop, we want to increment the time. So the way that we increment time 3 is we have to invoke the function for time 3. So time 3 dot increment with empty parentheses. That adds 1 second. That's what this does when we call time 3 increment. Then let's just print out the time. We don't need to do that cout statement for the value. Let's just do time 3 write, and then if we want to write these on separate lines, we'll do the cout and put an end line here, like that. So we will go through the loop, and k does need to have a value, doesn't it? K is 0. So we'll go through this loop 10 times, we'll increment, and then we'll write out the values. So now let's compile and run the program. Here's the result, and as it turns out, I made a common mistake. The time is not being incremented at all. And the reason the time was not being incremented is because I forgot that when we call the increment function, it's called by value. So remember, we have to collect the data that's returned by the function. So I should have time 3 is equal to the call of the function. So then when the return statement returns something, then it goes back into the variable time 3. Now, okay, now let's try this one more time. So we'll build it and run the program again. Now you can see that the result is what we would expect. So inside the loop, we start with time 23:59:50, and we add a second. Each time we call increment, we add a second. We call the write function to print it out. So the time changes 51 all the way up to 59, and then when it reaches the 2400 time, it turns out that there actually is an error that should go to 0, so I need to go fix that function. But you can see how the increment and the write function output the values for the time. Well, let's go back and fix that function, the increment function, which is really what we were testing at this point anyway. So let's go back in and fix that. Here I scroll down to the increment function, and what I've done is noticed I left off the result dot here. So in the previous if statements, I'm using this local variable result, but I failed to use the dot notation here, and I just wrote hours when it should be result dot hours. So that was the error right there. Right, okay, now one more time. Let's build it and run the program. And here you see we now have the correct results. So when we get to the end of the day at 23:59:59, we increment to midnight, and then we go into the early morning hours where it's 1 second past midnight, and that's the correct time. Okay, now given all that, let's just stop and go back and look at a few of these things. Remember, when we call the functions, we use the dot notation. So when you see inside these functions, you just see hours, minutes, and seconds without a dot notation associated with them. That means that they are the private variables that were used when we access the function using the dot notation, like time 1 dot equal or time 2 dot less than. The other ones inside these functions, where we have other time and then the dot notation, that references the object that came in through the argument list. So when you are writing in an object-oriented mode, then you can pass in the variables, the private variables that belong to an object when you call the function, but you can also pass in as many arguments as you choose as well. Any arguments that come in as type time of day, then you do need to use the dot notation to get to the parts of that particular object. So hopefully that is clear. If not, then maybe you should rewind the video and watch parts of it again. Now, to close this out, let's go back up near the top, and I want to show you that we can call these in equivalent ways. Let's go back to the first part of this where we're comparing time 1 and time 2 for equality. In this case, I'm calling the equal member function of time 1. Then the equal function automatically gets the private variables hours, minutes, and seconds of time 1 here. It gets the entire set of arguments for time 2 because of this argument that gets passed in. We can get the same result if we happen to choose time 2 dot equal and time 1 over here. So we have swapped them out. In this case, we're calling the equal function and we send it as part of the time 2, or I should say the time 2 object. We send its private variables in when we call the function here, but we send the parameters for time 1 through this argument list here. So now we will get the same thing. We just I can just show you we're calling them in the alternate technique. Because we're comparing equal, they're both going to be equal, so it doesn't matter. But we could have called it in either way. So let's build this and run it. And we'll see that these will turn out to be equal. Let's pull this over. So now, even though I have changed the time 2 and time 1, I'll swap those out, we still get the, in this case, the times are different because they were different up here. Time 1 is 5:30, time 2 is still 0. Then, if I do set them to be the same time down here, and then we call this one again, and this time 1 is over there, time 2 is over here, and we see that they are equal because I just set them equal. Anyway, that opens up then a lot of new territory for discovery with object-oriented program. This little program is hopefully simple enough that you can see the concepts of how to write the code, the syntax of how to write the code, and the new way that information can be passed when you call a function by using the private variables. Well, this video has gone on far long enough, so we will close this example here, and we'll pick up with another subject in another video at a different time.